What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the MLB Swing for the Fences show here on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel, talking Friday night's monster 13-game slate. You love to see it. 13 games to talk about, and a two-man booth tonight. We had a late scratch, Mr. Steve Boyden, not going to join us. Disappointing there. We do have some tickets to give away, both from members and from Steve, paying the price for ditching out early. We'll announce those in maybe a few minutes here. Let some more people trickle in. Those will be members only in the live show chat, but we'll get to that in a second. We'll throw it over to you. First stats, how you doing on this Friday afternoon?
Hanging in, man. I got the opportunity to drink like early morning, which was nice. That was I had a ceremonial groundbreaking event to go to. My college roommate is building a bunch of townhouses. So I was like, oh, beautiful. Look at this. 10 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. I get to partake in some cocktail. They had some champagne, Prosecco. It's nice.
Yeah, I can't relate. I've never, ever drank before noon myself, personally.
Yeah, it was a new experience for me. And I don't want to make a habit out of it, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, tough job. Someone's got to do it. You step up to the plate. So you love to see it. Let's jump into these games. Let's do the first game, and then we'll go back. We'll announce the contest for the tickets, but we do have 13 games to talk about. So let's jump in for now. Let's do Texas and Baltimore first. This one in Baltimore, like most of these games, I think at least some interesting stuff going on here. We've got Albert Suarez pitching for the Orioles. He's been pretty solid on a per inning basis, at least this year. Has kind of faltered in these last couple starts back in the rotation. Kind of seems like he's turning back into, the journeyman pitcher that he was coming into the year. He is favored here against Texas. Modest weather in Baltimore, and Max Scherzer making his second start of the year. First one went pretty well, frankly, against Kansas City. Only threw 57 pitches, but it was enough to get through 5 innings, 4 strikeouts, no walks. I don't know if you saw stats. Some injury kind of, I don't know. Questionable is not the right word, but vague injury stuff where Scherzer's apparently having trouble gripping a baseball, but with his thumb, but he's going to make the start anyway. So it all seems a little bit weird, but it's enough to have me slightly interested in Baltimore here. I mean, it is only Scherzer's second outing of the year. He's obviously an aging pitcher. He was kind of bad against left-handed power, even toward the tail end of his prime. And I think there's a realistic chance here, Stats, that we see something like Garrett Cole's second start, right, where it just completely collapses. Scherzer's already got the signs, apparently, with dealing with his injury. So I do think the Orioles, as a contrarian stack, make a little bit of sense. What are you doing, Stats, with Orioles and Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, what's going to sort of be a theme here, I think, today is there's not going to be many offenses that you can totally just throw out and don't want to play. I mean, there's no great offense here today. I don't think we have there's no 6.7 run projected Dodgers at Colorado or anything like that. So we've got everything's kind of bunched in. So I think there's going to be a lot of different ways. You'll see it on the cores. I'm sure everyone's going to have different cores tonight, which means the field itself is going to be kind of spread out. So I don't know if there's a lot of game theory to be had here. I think you kind of we're going to go with the stacks that you like. I don't really think anyone's going to be all that overly owned necessarily on the hitting side where you're really going to worry about it. So kind of with all that said, when I'm looking at both the pitchers, I'm kind of diving in really because of that, though. I'm looking at which pitchers I really want to fade more so than the offenses tonight. That's kind of what I've been looking at this afternoon today. So on this game, I really not two pitchers that I'm necessarily going to be high on. So I will have the bats quite a bit. I do have a K prop on Scherzer that I posted a little while ago. So I do have his over on his Ks. I know we had a big bet on his under Ks on that first matchup, but I do like the over for Scherzer. He was really efficient, like you said. He went way more than we anticipated, and we kind of had to sweat out that under that we had on his Ks last week. That was a Boynton play, but I think really the offenses are going to be the focus. I don't have any Suarez. I'm going to have just a little bit of I'll have a little bit of Scherzer in this matchup. And then I think you want to be kind of over the market, but I don't think over the market is all that high on both of these offenses. So I think you can get away with that somewhere around the 7 to 10, 11% range on stacks on both of these offenses. That's where I'm going to be with this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Not a ton of interest in the pitchers. For me, Scherzer's just too expensive at 9,100 against a good offense on a pitch count, dealing with injury. Just can't get there myself. But, you mentioned, a lack of offenses to cross off. I think that's partly because there's not that very many good pitchers to pitch on this slate. For a 13-game slate, I've only really got a couple of guys that I really like. Can take us the whole show to get out to that game. So it's going to be a lot of no interest in these pitchers for me as we move along here, including not including this game. We've got Toronto and the New York Yankees up next. Yusei Kikuchi going for Toronto. We've seen stats the Yankees offense that was so good early on in the season kind of fall off these last couple of weeks. Aaron Judge still doing his thing, but they obviously lost Giancarlo to injury. Gleyber Torres was so bad he got benched for a couple of games. Guys that have recently joined the lineup like LeMahieu, Jahmai Jones, Trevino aren't hitting. So outside of the big two, Judge and then of course Soto, they just don't got a lot going on. Kikuchi's already faced this Yankees team twice. Pitched very well against them overall, and that was against the better version of this Yankees lineup. So on a day that's tough for pitching, I do think Kikuchi is a pretty interesting play here. Pitchers at home too. We've seen Blue Jays pitchers do pretty well at home in general. So I like Kikuchi. Stroman, I think he'll be fine here, but in my opinion, too expensive at 8,700 in a low strikeout matchup against the Blue Jays. So not a ton of bats in this one for me outside of, Judge one-offs are obviously good plays against Kikuchi, but I do really like Yusei Kikuchi today. What about you, Stats? What are you doing? Toronto and New York?
So yeah, Kikuchi is going to be one of my big unders. So I'm going to be, I'll be under the market there. I think from Sabres looking at somewhere in the teens, I'm barely going to be playing him. Okay. Don't get me wrong. I love what's going on with the Yankees. The more the Yankees struggle, the better my life becomes. So I'm enjoying watching the Yankees suck, and the Mets actually win some games. So that does make my life a little bit better. But in this situation here, I'm just looking. I focus pretty heavily on the betting markets, and so we're seeing. Not that Kikuchi is basically not that he's being projected a high amount here by a lot of the websites, but I'm looking at a lot of these DFS sites that are projecting him way above where his market is as far as the betting markets. And typically when that happens, that's a good fade for me. So I've got him like 2 points lower than a lot of other sites do, which is fairly significant for a guy who's just projected to be, 15 and a half points on the slate. So I'm going to be, because of that, I'm going to be under on Kikuchi, and then that's going to get me more Yankee stacks. I know they haven't been hitting well, but this could be an opportunity here, at least on the getting them on a secondary stack. I kind of like, because you still have those big bats that are giving you some home runs. So you might be able to get those guys at slightly less ownership than you normally would, the Judges of the world, and be able to maybe make a good secondary stack with the Yankees. But it's really, for me, it's the pitching here. I'm not going to have much of Stroman, and Kikuchi is going to be at the bare minimum for me.
All right. I guess we will be a little different on Kikuchi there. That makes sense what you're saying with the betting market. I'm a little surprised it's as low as it is, and I still do like Kikuchi, but totally get where you're coming from. Good time, I think, to announce the ticket giveaway for today. We've got two $121 tickets to give away, and then two $44 tickets to give away. Those are courtesy of Boyden for bailing on this show. D Smith 152, who won the afternoon 121 yesterday. So congrats to him. Thanks for giving back. And Easy Money TY giving away the two $44 tickets. This will be a contest in the live show chat for members in the Discord. And competition today, reasons Boyden ditched out on this show. Top four will win tickets. Again, reasons Boynton ditched out on the show, I will be at least be monitoring live show chat, and we'll pick some winners at the end of the show. So get in there for members. All right, stats. Let's get to the next game on the slate: Colorado Rockies and the Chicago White Sox. This one in Chicago, so no Coors Field to deal with here. We've got Drew Thorpe pitching for the White Sox. He's been bad on the surface numbers. He's looked even worse on the underlying metrics. He did have a good outing results-wise last time out against Detroit. I think had some pretty good luck there, but did put up 24 DraftKings points. Overall, though, his numbers look pretty brutal. He does, of course, get an amazing matchup against a strikeout-happy Rockies team that, can barely hit inside a Coors Field. You take him out of it, and it's a struggle for them. So on this slate, I have very little faith in Drew Thorpe in the long term, but I do think he's at least in play here at 7,300, due to the matchup. And you could say the same thing for Dakota Hudson, but we've got enough sample size on him, in my opinion, that I just can't play him with the minuscule strikeout rate that he carries. Doesn't get any better for him, even outside of Coors Field, in terms of the strikeouts. The runs allowed do go down, of course, but Thorpe, I think, is an okay play here. Even at 5,300, I'm out on Hudson with the matchup against the White Sox. And then, I think either of these pitchers are pitchers you could stack against. Both of them, I think, capable of blowing up. Over to you, stats for White Sox and Rockies.
Yeah, I pretty much, I like what you said there as far as both offenses for sure. We can stack in this game. Now, I like Thorpe a little bit. I did take his over strikeouts 4.5, so I've got a bet on that. But as far as the market goes, it looks like I'm going to be kind of in line with where Saber has it at about 15%. That's about where I'm going to be on Thorpe. And then as far as Hudson, I'm going to play him, but I'm okay if you don't, right? So right now, if I'm going to play him, maybe 5% or something like that, just because this is just a wacky game. Like I kind of reading how you were reading it. We could get both of these teams could potentially go off. I think maybe the White Sox with a slightly better chance of that happening as far as stacks. And then we could see both of these, like either one of these pitchers maybe just shut down this other team. They're just so bad all the way around, both of these teams, that it's hard to kind of figure out which way, what you're going to get exactly. But I don't mind taking a shot. Yeah, good.
It's two of the worst pitchers on the slate, two of the worst bullpens on the slate, and two of the worst lineups on the slate. So
when I was going, I go through and I do all the team stats, team total stats, and I'm doing my pitching analysis, and I'm like, oh man, you always look at who's playing the White Sox, who's playing Colorado, who's playing Oakland, like those teams. I'm like, oh, they get to play each other. That makes for an interesting slate today. But I think of the two pitching options, I think Thorpe has the best upside here. I think there's quite a bit of strikeout potential for him on the Colorado side. And like I said, I do like his over 4.5 number. Again, it's just not a slate that I'm in love with a ton of the pitchers. So I think you're going to have to kind of spread it around a little bit, at least for me in the 150 builds. I'm going to have to spread out my pitching maybe a little bit more so than than normal. But same's going to hold true for my stacks. So if I was, I'm definitely playing both sides bats in this game, and I think the lean, at least the side that I will have more stacks of and more of their players is going to be the White Sox in this game. So I would definitely lean more White Sox all the way around on my builds here today.
Yeah, my suggestion for these two teams, I put it in Discord, and said instead of playing baseball for 3 days, they just have a rock fight and just this is the baseball that they play resembles something like that. So it's gonna be an ugly series, but especially with how bad the bullpens are, man, I wouldn't be surprised if one of these teams put up 10 plus runs just out of nowhere. Partly because not necessarily because the hitters are great, but I just think these pitchers are capable of getting blown up in any inning, never mind the start. So I do think kind of interesting contrarian stacks, both the White Sox and the Rockies. And then it sounds like both of us have at least some interest in Thorpe. Does seem like the strikeout upside is there. I do think he could just totally implode as well. But can certainly play both sides of Rockies and White Sox. San Diego and Boston are up next. This one in Fenway. Another pretty nice night to hit in Fenway. 75 degrees, some winds out to left center field. Nick Pivetta going for the Boston Red Sox. He's been pretty good this year. Has had 3 somewhat shaky starts in a row, but a good strikeout guy, a good DFS pitcher in general. I simply really don't play many pitchers at all against the San Diego Padres. I've talked about that a lot on this show. Just their strikeout rates up and down the lineup are just so low that they really take a lot of the upside out of the opposing pitcher. So I'm not on Pivetta here. Certainly not playing Randy Vasquez, who's making the start for the Padres. I do, however, have a lot of interest in Boston. I've played them a lot recently. I really like how the lineup sets up for them against pitchers who struggle against left-handed bats, and certainly Vasquez is that. His numbers against lefties this year are atrocious. He's giving up a ton of hard contact, can't strike anybody out, walking them. So like that top 4 for Boston, Duran, Hamilton, Abreu, Devers looks very, very spicy to me. Certainly going to have plenty of exposure there. Over to you, stats for Red Sox and Padres.
Yeah, that makes sense with the Red Sox. You've got Vasquez is projected for almost the most runs to be given up, earned runs on the slate of any of these starters, outside of maybe the Marsh and McKenzie. Though I think those are the only 2 that are higher. And then we don't have a lot of strikeout potential from either one of these pitchers really in this game. 4.1 is the projected strikeouts for Vasquez. Pivetta, we're looking at 4.8. I think of the 2, yeah, you could definitely play a little bit of Pivetta. I'm going to be way under though on the market, and I'm going to have 0 shares of Vasquez. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it from the pitching side. So I really don't love either one of these pitchers. Wouldn't if you don't have to, if you're not playing 150 lineups, I wouldn't suggest, or I would suggest not touching either one. I do agree. I think the potential here is greater on the Boston side as far as stacks go, but I kind of like the San Diego side of this game as well. And that's where I'm going to be getting overweight. So I think we can kind of take a shot against Pivetta. I didn't look at the weather out there in Fenway, but the wind, it's not a lot of wind, but it is blowing out the left field, which is always nice. So I'm going to have probably between the 2 here, I'm going to be somewhere in the 9 or 10% range across the board on the San Diego players. So I'm going to be actually have more San Diego bats than I do Boston bats, just more of a game theory. I think Boston obviously projected to score more. I've got them at like 5 runs, which is amazingly the top of all the teams. There's about 4 or 5 teams that are projected for about 5 runs, and San Diego's at 4.5, right in the middle of the pack. So, I think this is an opportunity to get a low-owned San Diego stack in there, and so I do like San Diego stacks over the Boston stacks a little bit.
I really hadn't given the Padres that much consideration as a stack, but Sayers got the entire team below 1% owned on the Padres, which for it's a good park to hit in Fenway. It's not like Pivetta is blow up proof. They're going to put the ball in play, and not a great bullpen for the Boston Red Sox behind Pivetta. So kind of like that on San Diego. I don't know if I'll get there on one of my 5 teams, but certainly if I was playing with a lot of teams, would want to be over the field on what looks like a really, really low-owned Padres team. They could absolutely do damage. So might try to get there a little bit on the Padres with you. Stats. Let's get to the next game on the slate. Some pretty good submissions rolling in for the ticket giveaway. Again, tell us the reason Boynton couldn't make the show today. We'll pick the winners at the end of the show. Up next, Houston Astros and the New York Mets. This one, just straight pick them in the betting market. We've got Jose Quintana pitching for the Mets, coming off 2 really, really good games. Had struggled in the 3 prior, but 2 25-plus fantasy point games for Quintana. I really doubt anything has changed with him or anything like that, but pitchers do occasionally have a couple good games in a row, even mediocre ones. Like Quintana, Ronel Blanco continues to keep it rolling. Oh, man, where would the Astros be without his strong innings? He's pitched 84 innings already with a ERA below 2.5. Kind of a crazy out of nowhere season from Blanco. I'm seeing some ownership on him tonight, I believe, which I get given the state of the slate. It actually looks like it'll be pretty low, maybe around 10, 15%. And then Jose Quintana, I can't imagine many people are going to play him against Houston. I certainly wouldn't. Do like these Houston bats quite a bit against Quintana. And I'm just not picking on this Mets team right now. Stats, it sounds like you're a Mets fan. Yeah, I mean, you really want to pick on one of the hottest teams in baseball at home, good hitting weather on a 13-game slate? For me, no. I'm not going to play Blanco at 9,800. But what are you doing stats with the Mets and the Astros here?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the Mets they're pretty hot right now. And yeah, at that price tag, I think we've got some better options for pitching than Blanco. So right now, tentatively, I'm looking at something in the mid single digits as far as my ownership on Blanco. And then I agree with you on Quintana. I think just a total waste. You don't want any piece of that. So if we're going to just look at the betting market quick, you've got, I mean, Quintana's not even projected for 4 strikeouts, like 3.9 strikeouts there. Blanco, respectable 5.2 strikeouts, but still at that price tag, I just want a little bit more. And we'll see. I'll show you some other guys on this slate that are going to give you a little bit more, at least in the projections in the betting markets go. So, yeah, don't really love either of these pitchers. But I do agree with you. I think we can play some Houston stacks here against Quintana. And that is the side I prefer more of this game. I do like the Houston. But to be honest, this is going to be a very, very low-owned game all across the board for me, pitching and hitters. But just a slight nod, I think, to the Houston offense. And I don't know. I can't even bring myself to go too heavy on Houston. They've burned me so many times. But yeah, I think you kind of have to play Houston over the Mets here tonight. But not a game that I'm terribly interested in all that much.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. This Mets team, I kind of want to be over the field on them on most nights right now while they're going. Francisco Alvarez back in there, just crushing baseballs. We know how hot Lindor. I mean, it's almost like a 1 through 9 thing with this team right now. So I'm gonna get some Mets stacks in there. They'll be, I assume, I can pull it up quick here, but I mean, I don't think anybody's playing the Mets. Yeah,
no.
1% on Mets stack.
Yeah,
with the way they've been playing ball, and I'm not. I know Blanco's been good. I don't think he is some ace. So I do think that's a decent contrarian way to go. Let's get to the next game on the slate, Pittsburgh and the Atlanta Braves. This one in Atlanta. Possible rain concerns here, so something to monitor. I do think they will be able to play, but at least something to keep an eye on, especially given some of the kind of strange postponements we've had over the last week. But here we've got Charlie Morton, Martin Perez. Perez coming off the IL, missed over a month. Was struggling prior to that as well. So kind of a tough spot here to, well, at least in theory, to come off the IL and face the Braves. Obviously, the Braves have been maybe the most disappointing offense this year. I think or one of them at least. And then, Morton will go up against the Pirates, who, Reynolds, Cruz, both those guys I think are always decent plays. I think that's true tonight. Braves right-handed power to me looks really good against Martin Perez, at least on paper. And Morton, I think, is going to get some ownership here. Stats. I think he's a fine play. A couple pitchers out on the West Coast that are expensive that I like better, but I do think Morton's got to be in the discussion. Obviously a volatile pitcher, but he can get strikeouts when he's on his game. Obviously a pretty good matchup here against the Pirates. Curious what you're doing with Morton and the rest of this game stats.
Yeah, so Morton's going to be my favorite pitcher on the night. Very few of these guys there's only a couple of guys that are projected to get more than 6 strikeouts. We don't have any real dominant pitchers going tonight. So Morton at the 9,500, I like quite a bit. And I should be, hopefully, I will be over the market, or at least that's my intention going into this. So Morton's going to be one of my favorite pitchers to go to target here tonight, which means obviously I'm not going to have all that many Pirate stacks, But I agree with you on as far as picking on Perez. I don't mind that at all. So I like the Atlanta bats in this game as well. And certainly the pitching with Charlie Morton, who's probably going to be my highest owned pitcher on this slate. So that'll give away the end of the show. But that's probably going to be the guy I'm going to have the most interest on and be watching closest tonight. I just like this matchup against Pittsburgh. And, the betting markets, again, I always look at the market. We're looking at a lot more points projected in the betting markets than a lot of the projections are giving in the DFS world for Morton. So he is definitely skewing towards having a good game in the betting markets.
Yeah. I like Morton too. I'm a little surprised you're on him over a couple of guys we'll get to at the end of the slate, but certainly understand it. Certainly a good matchup against the Pirates there. Let's get to Cleveland and the Kansas City Royals up next. This one in Kansas City, which I talk about it a lot, but one of the better hitters parks once you get to this type of this part of the year with the heat there. And it's going to be another game where it's going to be steamy, 90 degrees, 60% humidity, winds blowing out to left center field in KC. And we've got two pitchers who I kind of like to pick on. Alec Marsh, his season-long numbers look okay to me. He's one of the pitchers pitching most over his head compared to his kind of long-term talent level. Has kind of come back to get him in these last couple starts. Hasn't been super great in 3 of his last 5. Gets a Cleveland team that makes a lot of contact, has some left-handed power. I think the Guardians set up well here. And then people that have been watching the show now, I've been picking on Tristan McKenzie quite a bit. Haven't gotten it quite right with him, but man, just walking so many guys every time out. Hasn't made it more than 3 innings in either of the last 2 games. Hasn't made it 6 innings in like 7 straight games. So I love the Royals here against McKenzie. The problem is that Cleveland bullpen, man. You get a close game and they come into the game and they shut it down for the last however long it takes. I mean, 5 or 6 innings they could do it. So I lean the Guardian side more. One bet I really like is the over for the game in the first 5 innings of this one. And I'll have some Royals too, but yeah, it is irritating when your stack gets going against the Guardians and then in comes the bullpen and it's just lights out for 4 or 5 innings. So, we'll throw it over to you, Stats. What are you doing here with Guardians and Royals?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right with that maybe first 5 early game over call. I mean, both of these pitchers are projected for the highest runs to be given up by each of these starters. I mentioned Vasquez was 3.4. These guys, Marsh is projected 3.6 runs and 3.5 for McKenzie. You just don't even see all that often a lot in the mid 3s, and we've got 2 pitchers going against each other that are projected for mid 3s in the same game here. So not a lot of strikeouts being projected for either one, 4.1 on both sides. So moral of the story is we're going to kind of stay away from the pitchers, and then it becomes a matter of which one of these stacks. These are going to be 2 of the higher owned stacks, I believe, on the slate. I think both teams are going to be owned here. So if we kind of throw that out of the equation where we're kind of playing the game theory standpoint, I kind of agree. I think you're leaning more towards the Cleveland side in stacks than Kansas City, which I would as well. I agree with what you're saying on the with Cleveland when they come in with that bullpen. I think the better stack option is going to be Cleveland. But I would say this: if you're going to be playing single entry, I don't know if this is the number 1 stacks. I got to go through them all. I haven't looked at all the projections, but I would imagine Cleveland and Kansas City, at least the top players, the top guys in the batting order there, the Witts, the Jose Ramirez, Sal Perez, those type of guys are going to be some of the higher owned players on the entire slate. So if I was playing a single entry, I'd probably just avoid this game and look elsewhere and see if I can do some. There's just plenty of other games with similar team totals, but yeah, on paper, I could totally see where Cleveland just becomes the nuts here. I mean, they're hitting the ball. We talked about the Mets, but Cleveland's been putting some runs up as well. So I think they're going to get a decent amount of ownership. I think in 150 lineups, you've got to get at least 10% of your stacks on both of these teams, I think. And then, like I said, with lesser, if you're only playing small amount of lineups, this would be a game that I might be looking to fade and just hoping for the best and hoping that you catch the right game, because this will probably have some of the higher ownerships on the board.
Yeah, you would certainly think so. People mentioning thunderstorms in the area. We saw, those games, St. Louis, Kansas City, you do get severe storms there, obviously. So something you got to monitor up until lock for sure. I will say, if I had to pick one pitcher to not get out of the first inning today, it would be Tristan McKenzie. So for that reason, I got to stick with some Royals. If you do enough damage, right, where maybe gives up 6 or 7 runs in the first, they pull him. At that point, then you might get the not Cleveland has mostly good pitchers in the pen, but you could potentially miss out on their best guys if the Royals are able to do a bunch of damage to McKenzie early. Which, given how wild he is, and just I'm telling you, I've watched all his starts, and like a true, just absolute implosion is coming for McKenzie soon. Bobby Witt also 2 home runs off of him the last time they played each other. I think Bobby Witt, really interesting play here, and the weather sets up perfectly for him against McKenzie in KC tonight. We're about halfway through the show, 6 games to talk about. Competition is ongoing, and I got to say, we've got some decent submissions in chat. Nothing that's locked down those tickets yet. So tell us what Boyden or why he couldn't make this show. That's Steve Boyden, and we'll give away 4 tickets at the end of the show. Again, members can enter the contest or give your answers in the live show chat channel. We do, of course, have all sports, everything you need over at runpuresports.com. You can use promo code DC15. We got a huge UFC card coming up tomorrow. Golf going on. We're in the best ball streets. Stats, I know you're involved with the auto racing, all that good stuff. So get over to runpuresports.com. Use promo code DC15. Hit the like button, please. And with that, we'll move on to the second half of the slate. Chicago Cubs, Milwaukee Brewers, 8.5 total in this one. 2 mediocre righties going at it. Colin Rea for the Brewers and Jameson Taillon for Chicago. This is another game where the bullpens here are going to go overlooked. Chicago's has been one of the worst in baseball, especially recently, and the Brewers have kind of been carried by their bullpen recently. A lot of emerging arms coming out of there. It seems to be a little bit of a theme with the Brewers pen. So that has to be more on the Brewers side of this game, who I think are interesting against Taillon and that Cubs pen. What about you, Stats? What are you doing with Brewers and Cubs here?
So on the pitching front, not playing any of Taillon, and I've got a bit of Colin Rea. I've got right now I'm looking at 10 to 15%, something like that on him. So I guess if Saber's correct, that's going to be over the market. But like I said, I'm going to have a total fade on Taillon. We look at the betting markets on these guys. They're both right around the 4.5 strikeouts, not looking for a whole lot. Taillon, they're looking for a little bit more runs to be given up. But across the board, they're pretty similar. And then it translates to, but it does, I guess they kind of look similar as on the front. I'm looking at the one big difference is hits. So it winds up being about a 2-point differential in favor of Rea. So he's about 14.7 projected when you look at the betting market. So, I'm not going to go crazy here with him, but he will be 10 to 15% of my lineups. Now for the offenses, I like what you're saying with the bullpens. I probably focus maybe to a fault. I focus more on the starting pitching. I always feel like if the stack is going to get there, like you're usually it's going to be a team that's beating up on the other team early in the game, and you don't get to those good strong relievers. Obviously, that doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you get lucky, and it becomes all the runs get flooded in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. But typically, like we're kind of playing against the starting pitchers when we look at these stacks, and we're not really projecting either one of these teams to be very high owned. I'm leaning a little bit higher. I don't have a ton of these stacks. I've got more Cub stacks to the tune of like 7 or 8%, and just behind that on the on stacks with Milwaukee, probably the 4 to 6% variety on their play. So I'm not huge over on this game, but I don't think we're projecting a lot of ownership on the bats or the pitchers for that matter in this game. So I think anything in that high single digit percentile, probably get you over on this game, which is, quite frankly, I don't have a strong opinion in my 150 builds today. So whenever I'm in that situation, it's like, yeah, get me over on some of the teams that are going to be super low owned, and get me under on the high owned teams, and then hope for the best. But if you're playing this as a single entry, 1 bullet, 3 bullet sort of deal, you've got to basically use that same mentality, but find the game that is going to be low owned. There's a lot of them, and see which way you want to play. This could be a game that you like here. There's another game that I like a little bit more that we're coming up on, but this could be a game that certainly either side of this game, I think, has the potential to go off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, I do prefer the Brewers side of the game, but could see that game honestly going down a number of different ways. That's kind of true of most of the games on the slate, and true of baseball in general, but I do think especially true for the Chicago Cubs Milwaukee Brewers game. Cincinnati and St. Louis are up next. This one in St. Louis. So again, actually should be fine for weather in this one. Andre Payante going for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's 7,700. Did throw 95 pitches in his last turn, so looks like they are stretching him out to be a full starter for the team. For now, he's always been a very low strikeout guy. Doesn't give up a ton of power, but yeah, kind of a bowling ball type sinker baller who isn't great, but maybe isn't the best guy to hit home runs off of, that type of thing. Frankie Montas going for the Reds, opposite of Payante. He's been okay this season. I used him in that Colorado start where we got 36 points. That was fantastic. Been obviously not that good since then, but he did make my list today. Stats against a Cardinals team that's kind of neutral-ish, I would say, in matchup. Same with the park, neutral-ish. And it's just the price tag, 6,500, and the duration with Montas. They do typically let him go 5 or 6 innings. So on a slate that I really couldn't find much on the cheap pitching that I was interested in, Montas did make the cut for me, partly because it doesn't look like anybody else is going to cheap pitching with Montas. And from what I'm looking at, it's close enough between a lot of these guys that kind of wanted the lower owned guys. So I'm seeing Montas around 5%. That seemed like a decent play to me. What about for you, Seth? What are you doing, Cincinnati and St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love either one of these pitchers here, but I get what you're saying with Montas. I mean, I'm going to be right around that 5%, which probably be, kind of market. So I am going to sprinkle some of them in. My GPPs in the 150. I won't have any Pallante. Is that how we say it? Did we say it? Is it Pallante?
Pallante? Yeah, I don't know.
Pallante? Is it?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
The Y sounding double L? Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's not making the cut for me. I totally get why you'd want to have maybe some Montas, especially in 150 builds. But this game, I don't know. This game kind of stood out for me when I looked. Again, I'm looking at which pitchers can I fade, which pitchers are showing up in the betting markets weaker than they are on some of the projections. And that really was both pitchers in this game for me. So this is a game where I put my cores in early, up at least on the DraftKings side before we started the show. And, they could be subject to change. But as of right now, I really like stacking this game. I think it's not quite, we're going to have some ownership. Dela Cruz will have, some ownership and Steer, India, but not crazy ownership. And I kind of like playing some stacks here with those guys. So I think stacking this entire game is going to be my core. So yeah, that's where I'm going. I don't think it's heavily owned. I think just looking at the betting markets, I kind of like the way they're leaning on this one. And that's where I'm going to be firing a lot of bullets.
All right. That's Cincinnati, St. Louis. Love it there. Let's go to Detroit and the LA Angels. Up next, we've got two not good pitchers here, Kenta Maeda and then Zach Plesac, who hasn't really pitched much in the last couple of years with dealing with some injuries. Made 2 starts this year. They haven't gone particularly well. He come up against the Brewers and then the Dodgers in his last start. Gave up 6 earned runs over 3 1/3. He's been bad against lefties, really bad. So I think the Tigers, Colt Keith, Riley Green are somewhat interesting here. Bad bullpen for the Angels as well. And then Kenta Maeda, who obviously is on his last legs to some degree. Bad bullpen from the Tigers, too. So I can't play either Plesac or Maeda personally. I do think the bats on both sides are somewhat interesting here and maybe somewhat sneaky as well. What about you, Stats? What do you see between the Detroit Tigers and LA Angels?
Yeah, this is a very similar game to the last one. For me, I do like both sides of the offenses in this matchup. You mentioned Plesac. I mean, he's only projected here for 3.6 strikeouts, not even to get – neither one of these pitchers projected to get a full 5 innings, so that'll kind of tell you where the market is there on these guys. So not a lot of faith in using either of these pitchers, and because of that, I kind of like I like the stacks in this game. Not, we don't have typically high team totals today. 4.8 for Detroit. The Angels like 4.5, which again, it's going to be one of these teams right around that 4.5 to 5 that are going to pop at least one of these teams, and it could be this game as well. That I just don't like either one of these pitchers. I'm down on both, so I'm going to target this game. I think you said sneaky, and I think you might be right. This is probably even less ownership in this game than we'd have in that Cincinnati-St. Louis game. But these are back-to-back, probably my 2 favorite games today as far as all 4 of these teams in stacks. I think you could play any combination of these 4. They're my favorite. And I don't think, especially in this game, you're just not going to have the same ownership level that you have with maybe some of those Cincinnati guys and St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, you get to the later games here, you get some, maybe your pitching does well, or you get a mini stack. Like I'm feeling pretty good if I got Tigers or Angels, 5-man Tigers or Angels with the lineup that looks clean. Like I'll take my shot against either of these pitchers. I know the lineups aren't the best, but both of these pitchers are capable of laying a complete egg. So I'm with you. I think Detroit and the Angels does make a lot of sense tonight. Let's get to the last 3 games. They are all, of course, on the West Coast, or out west at least. Oakland and Arizona up next. This one in the 9:40 Eastern time window. We've got Slade Ciccone pitching for Arizona. Seen some chatter about him. Looks like he'll have at least a moderate amount of ownership, seeing him around 15% perhaps against the Oakland A's, which has got to be just a matchup play, which I totally get it. I play all kinds of pitchers against the A's, the Rockies, the White Sox. Just the matchups that we're certain are just so good on a night-to-night basis. And the Ciccone, I really don't think he's any good whatsoever. And I don't love the ownership on him. I talked about Frankie Montas. I'll take a third of the ownership, whatever it ends up being there. Kind of think they're similar plays. And in the pitch count, I'm worried about Ciccone as well. I mean, he's been 75 or under in 4 of the last 5. Only threw 46 pitches last time out, 70 the time before that. It seems like Arizona has come to the realization that he's not really an answer as more than 1 or 2 times through the order. So I think it's kind of hard to project what his pitch count might look like, but given the worry about duration and real worry about his skills, even in this matchup, I'm kind of having a hard time getting their stats, especially given that it does seem like a number of users are going to use him. On the other side, Sears, bad matchup for him against this right-handed power that Arizona brings to the table. I think the Diamondbacks could absolutely hit some long balls off of Sears today. So, yeah, I think I'm out on Ciccone at that ownership. I get why people are playing. I'm not playing Sears. It's mostly the right-handed power from the Diamondbacks that interests me in this game. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to be in on Ciccone, just like a lot of other people are, but it's not like I have a lot of conviction behind that. It's strictly what you were saying. I mean, it's just the matchup. You're going up against Oakland here, and then you're getting the right price. So he's going to find his way into a bunch of my lineups to the tune of probably 20% on DraftKings. So Sears, not quite as much. Really don't like this matchup at all in Arizona. So basically, it's a total fade for me on the Sears side. You talk about, how deep can Ciccone go? I mean, the market's basically projecting him for 5 1/3 innings, and for almost 5 strikeouts. So, I mean, the strikeout numbers, it's nothing that's jumping off the page. I think this is strictly a matchup. We've got some upside with this matchup and at this price. I don't think anyone's going into this thinking, Ciccone's getting us 30 points. I think it's just strictly based on his price tag tonight and the matchup, and for that reason, I can't really argue with you if you say, you know what, I'm just going to totally fade him in this spot. In my 150 lineups, I can't do that. And I even want to get just a little bit over. Although, I think they're saying like 15% on Saber.
Yeah.
I think he will be in the 20s. I think it'll actually be higher than that, just because of that price tag and the fact that there's just really not that many great pitching options. So I think people will be more apt to just say, you know what, I'll take a shot on a shit pitcher here in a good matchup over some of these other pitchers that I've got to pay over $9K for that aren't necessarily in great spots anyway. So I think we'll get probably more than that 15% ownership that Saber's looking for, in which case I'm probably going to be closer to the market at 20 to 25%. But I think that's how I'm going to play it. If you want to totally fade it, I think that's fine as well from a game theory standpoint. But then the Oakland side of this game, I don't really love the Oakland bats here, but I do agree with you on the Arizona side. This is another game I don't think it's going to be typical high owned. I don't think we're going to have a lot of ownership. So I think if you want to get overweight on the Diamondbacks and get some stacks there, I don't mind that at all in this matchup.
Yeah. Actually, hadn't thought about this one too much either, but the A's contrarian stack, I think, is a little bit interesting. The D-backs, I mean, we acknowledge Ciccone's not any good. The A's do have some power. The D-backs bullpen has been faltering recently. And you get the leverage, right? Especially if we think Ciccone's going to be a little bit higher owned. I mean, yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, you probably do want to play some Oakland stacks.
They're cheap too.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Play the top of that lineup.
Yeah.
Langeliers will have some. Yeah, none of these guys are going to be crazy owned, and you can really just play the top, the top 4 or 5 guys in that lineup and pretty good. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Yeah, with as a contrarian play to Ciccone and leverage play. I like that.
Yeah, when I do that with a team like Oakland, no one's playing. I'm trying to play the 5 best bats, right? Just 1 through 5. In my opinion, you don't need to get cute and go to the bottom of the lineup in a situation like that. You're different enough as it is. All right, last 2 games, Minnesota and Seattle. I keep talking about it on the show, but can't emphasize enough just how pitcher friendly this park in Seattle is playing. It's best shown just by looking at the stark differences of all of the Seattle pitchers. It's pretty crazy how much better they've been at home than on the road. It certainly applies to Logan Gilbert, who's been, just lights out at home and still decent, still good on the road. He actually has not as harsh of splits as some of his teammates. But I was looking at some of the park factors, which most people think of park factors as, is it easy to hit home runs there or not? But there's a lot more that goes to it. And year after year, Seattle is the best or one of the best parks for strikeouts. And that's true again this year. The best park for strikeouts from both opposing and, percentage-wise from the difference that you would expect for both Seattle pitchers and pitchers going against them. So I like Gilbert here, of course, at 9,900. But my favorite pitcher on the night is Bailey Ober, coming off 2 monster performances. They were both against the Oakland A's. He's been very kind of matchup dependent this year. But when he's had a good matchup, he's generally delivered a good outing. And this is a great, great spot for him against a Seattle team that has a ton of strikeouts in the lineup. Of course, the park doesn't really get much better than pitching in Seattle. And then just the way Ober pitches, one of the highest fly ball home runs get to him. But it's a really tough park for home runs. So I kind of like everything here for Ober. I think the strikeouts can be there. He's a low walk guy. Doesn't have to worry about the home runs in this park and kind of just attack the zone. And and hopefully be efficient and get deeper into the game. So I'm in on Ober and Gilbert. I do think they're going to be the two highest owned pitchers on the slate. But on this slate, I think it's good chalk. I don't think either of them are going to be a crazy number, partly due to the number of games. And I do expect two good pitching performances here. I'll pass on the bats in this one. What about you, Stats? What are you doing with Seattle and Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle, you're right. That ballpark has killed me before I played it, just not factoring it in, just kind of looking at some of the numbers that I look at. And it's been a killer. So I agree with you. It's all about the pitchers in this one. And Ober's going to be one of my higher owned pitchers as well. And more so than Gilbert in this game. You got $1,100 differential, and essentially Ober is just slightly projected just slightly higher than Gilbert. So just by that alone, I will have more on the Ober side, and I'm definitely I'm going to try to get over the market at least somewhere in the 35 to 40% ballpark. I don't know. I mean, we're thinking 30% from Saber. I think if I get it up to 40%, I should be okay on Bailey Ober. And then because of how much Morton I'm thinking about having, is I'm going to be under on the Gilbert, on Logan Gilbert in this one. So, and that's just because that ownership at that price is really going over to Morton for me. But I don't dislike Gilbert at all in this matchup. I think it's both pitchers are definitely in play. And then both offenses, I don't even like it as a contrarian play or as a leverage play, just because, like you said, this ballpark makes it real tough. It's got the lowest total with two of the lower team totals on the board for both of these teams. Just not a game I think you want to even mess around with bats as one-offs, secondary stacks. Just kind of leave it alone and just hammer these pitchers for sure.
Yeah, 100% agree there. And Ober will be definitely on my main team tonight. Let's go to the Dodgers and the San Francisco Giants up next. This one, another pick 'em in the betting market. Logan Webb, of course, has been he's been Logan Webb, just rock solid all year long. He does pitch better at home. It's been a career-long thing for Mr. Webb. 9,300 expensive price tag, even at home against this Dodgers team. And then Landon Knack pitching for the Dodgers. I don't think he's all that great either, but he has pitched fairly well for them. Looks like he's mostly stretched out, 73 pitches over 5 innings in his last start. Does get to pitch in an Austin Park in San Francisco and does get a pretty weak Giants lineup. Knack just barely missed the cut for me, but it was close, and maybe could be convinced onto him. I don't think I'm paying for the bats here. Stats, last game of the night, Giants and Dodgers. What do you got for us?
I'm not going to help you get to Knack. So, I mean, the projections for him are sub 5 innings, 14 outs, basically, 4 strikeouts. It's just not enough for me to get on board. I'll have a little bit of Logan Webb, though. Again, I'm not going to go crazy here. I think my pitching is really going to be that last game, and Morton, that's going to be the bulk of the pitching. Bats in this game, I don't really love the ballpark. I think you can take some one-offs on the Dodgers side, maybe, of the game, with their big bats, or maybe play them as a secondary stack. But it's a game I'm going to pretty much want to avoid the bats in this one. I think we've got some better spots, and you're always going to get inflated ownership on the Otanis and Freemans and things like that, even though not the best of matchups today. I just think we've got some better options. And, I mean, look at Ohtani could hit 2-3 home runs on any given day, but I think this is a game you want to fade the bats, I think, on both sides of this game.
Makes total sense. Let's get to stacks and pitching and all that. I will announce the winners here of the ticket giveaways. Before we get to that, the two $121 tickets are going to go to Jacob Stubbs and Mr. Coy. Pretty funny comments in the chat, 2 loyal members in the Discord. So hit me up for those tickets. And the two $44 tickets will go to Matty Ice and Rick Majerus. So that's Jacob Stubbs, Mr. Coy, Matty Ice, Rick Majerus. Send me a DM on Discord, and we'll get you hooked up with those tickets. Nice job, guys. All right, stats. Let's get to your favorite stacks. Give us your overall favorite and your favorite contrarian stack.
So I don't know. I think they're probably both leaning on the contrarian side. So I'm just going to say I like that Cincinnati St. Louis game. So take them whichever side you want. Which one's the contrarian? Which one's my favorite? I'm going to stack that game, and I'll hold off on I'll let you do your stack, and then we'll do our pitchers, I guess.
All right. Favorite stack for me is going to be the Red Sox. I'll have the lefties against Randy Vasquez, and I think there's a lot of good options, honestly, for contrarian stacks on this slate. But I'll go with the A's against Slade Ciccone. Mostly a pick against him as a popular, cheap option. And, his numbers don't look super great. So I'll take a chance on the Oakland A's as my contrarian stack. Most important pitcher tonight's stats, who are you riding with?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Charlie Morton for me. Probably going to have my highest ownership. So I'll definitely need him to pitch well.
It'll be Bailey Ober pitching in Seattle. Pretty easy choice for me. Going to be on most, if not all, of my lineups tonight. Who's going yard? Stats. Who's leaving the argument?
Bobby Witt hits the home run here tonight. I like that. We talked about that matchup as well, being potential a lot of runs, and so I like the chances for Witt to hit one out. I'll
go with my man. I go with him frequently, but Mr. Josh Naylor takes Alec Marsh or a member of that Royals bullpen deep. And finally, your overall favorite hitter on the slate.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in that Cincinnati game in St. Louis. I think we see a lot of runs. And the guy was always in the middle of it. Ellie De La Cruz, I think, gets us 20-plus points here tonight.
Love it. I will go with Christian Yelich. Gets the lefty platoon advantage against Taillon. I like lefties against him and can probably run a little bit in this matchup as well. That'll do it for this Friday show. No Saturday show for MLB. I'll be back on Sunday morning. Congrats to the ticket winners and all the successful screenshot folks, winners in the baseball streets over the last week. Been a good run for RPS. Hopefully we'll continue tonight and we'll see some RPS logos up top the leaderboards. That'll do it until Sunday morning. He's Stats. I'm Draft Sheet. We're out of here.